can't hear you. Wait. Oh, okay. I should probably use push to talk
Hello?
too. Hey,
How's it going?
good, good. How are you?
Well, I can't complain much.
Same.
Well then, I've got it recording, so what we can do is jump right on in to you giving a brief introduction with yourself and where you're at currently, and then maybe tell us a little bit how you got started with the games industry.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Allie Murdock, and I also go by Huggles or best_Huggles on the interwebs. And I am a product manager at a company called VReal right now. And I have a history basically of doing community management, and only at my more recent job have I moved into a product manager role. And at VReal, I basically work on various features of the app. It's a VR streaming app, and I work a lot with like influencers and do some like user testing and design. I kind of wear many hats because it's a startup company. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of what I'm doing these days.
It's pretty neat. How's the VR space treating you so far?
I it's really fun. I have to say, it's like it's a new space. It's so everyone is just kind of excited about exploring and overcoming challenges and learning about like the limits of VR and or lack of limits, I suppose. So it's very challenging and really fun at the same time because it just means that we get to kind of play around with ideas and just try to do different things, which is really nice.
Yeah, I can imagine some of the freedoms that you have that like AAA games don't have anymore just because there is such an expectation of what a AAA video game is, whether it's an MMO or an FPS or anything like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think um MMOs are so expansive, right? Like there's so many things that you have to kind of pay attention to, and I think in a sense the gaming industry has moved away a little bit from MMOs to be like more PvP games, but maybe that's just my own personal bias because I tend to like PvP games more.
Yeah, no, I
um,
agree. I think MMOs are a tough sell these days. Like either you find one that really gets you into it and that's like then your jam and then you stick with it for a long time, but I don't you don't hear about many MMOs launching anymore. It's a lot of these games as a service type things that are smaller bite-sized chunks and there's a less defined end game to it as it is just find something that you can grind on that you enjoy.
yeah, I kind of wonder if that will eventually change. I mean, making MMOs more popular again eventually. I think I don't know. Part of me feels like people are eventually going to get really sick of the toxicity that's involved in PvP games and kind of desire the like old school like nostalgia of MMOs. And also, I think, well, we kind of see this with Magic the Gathering, where I think there was just a period of time where it wasn't really doing like that well as a game, and in more recent years it's seen like huge spikes in growth and like sales and stuff. And I have to say it makes me really happy because Magic the Gathering Online was like the first like online video game I ever actually really like delved into.
Oh yeah. That was a great start, a great place to start, really.
Oh my god. It brings back memories though. Like I was such a shit on that game. so, sorry if I shouldn't
No, you're
say
fine. You're
slur there.
fine. Have you been playing
but
much of the latest Magic the Gathering?
actually I haven't, and it's you know, part of it is like just where I'm at in life right now. I'm kind of just like I don't really want to invest the time and the money, I guess, into Magic again. I'm not like mentally prepared for it. You know what I mean? Like it's
Oh,
like a lot of my
absolutely.
time goes to like VR and streaming, and then like I also am totally addicted to Overwatch as well. So
I keep seeing your posts on it, and it's amazing to see how well you've like just risen to the top. Basically, I hear your complaints and I see some of your highlight clips, and it's just hilarious. Like I'm used to you being on the community QA team, and it's just like, oh, here's Happy Allie all the time, and then it's just like, bam, get to business.
yeah, I it kind of depends on my mood, I would say. Like I try as best as possible to be positive whenever I can, especially in PvP games like Overwatch. I just feel like there's more than enough toxicity and negativity in general in PvP games. So I'm always like that person that's trying to like de-escalate situations, but also because I like to win. I am very competitive.
Well, I feel like we'll have plenty to talk about maybe a little bit later, but let's start back at the beginning. How did you get involved with the games industry?
Yeah, so I actually started, and you know this because we worked together at ArenaNet, but that was my first industry job, and I did QA there. And I guess technically, I don't know if you would consider this because I wasn't necessarily getting paid, but I was like addicted to Guild Wars 2, and um, like my sister was a designer, or is a designer actually. She still works there. She's a designer at ArenaNet, and like I she got me into the alpha test, and I cracked out on that game. Like I could not stop playing, and like I took the testing very seriously, and I was like, you know, like they would give you guidelines for like, oh, this is good information to give us if you get a bug, like provide like repro steps and everything. And I was like, I'm gonna provide repro steps for every single thing, and I'm gonna try to reproduce it myself. And I was like so obsessed with it. And then it actually ended up getting me a job at Arena because a QA position opened, and I was like, maybe I'll give it a shot. And I guess everyone would like, I don't know, my sister told me that people would just talk about my bugs and how they were like so surprised like to see someone that was like so dedicated and not even getting paid for it.
Oh yeah, there's very few people who actually go to the level that, if I'm remembering right, the level that you were writing bugs at. So it's usually the hardcorest and the people who are already fanatics that only do that, and it's just good to have your fanatics around.
Yeah, for sure. And I had played a ton of the original Guild Wars as well. Like after actually I left Magic the Gathering to play Guild Wars, and I was in this like super competitive guild that would do these like crazy super just trolly kind of builds in a GVG, and we would just have so much fun and just like we I think part of why I try really hard to be like positive nowadays is to like atone for my
Oh
past
no.
trollishness. But yeah, it was pretty cool. It felt really good for me to say like, okay, I'm doing this testing, and then I go in and I interview, and I guess I did well because I got the job, and it was like, I don't know, it was a crazy life change for me, honestly. Like I never really expected myself, I guess, to be able to get a job in the games industry. Like it's notoriously hard to get in, so I was just really happy and fortunate to have that role, and it was a wild ride. Like I remember like I was roommates with four of my coworkers. Like we were all renting out a house. Like it's fun times.
That's crazy. All four of you working together and renting together. That's not a situation I had heard of since like probably I don't know early 2000s with a lot of testers I had heard about it at Blizzard.
Yeah, yeah. It was cool though. Like and at one point most of us had even worked on the same team within ArenaNet. Like I after working on QA for a little while, I ended up moving on to like the alpha team and helping run the alpha because I also was a very like kind of gregarious person and I enjoyed doing that kind of stuff, like socializing with people and building community and stuff. So it was kind of like a natural move for me to go into community. And I eventually started doing like PvP community there because nobody was doing it. And I was like, really enjoy PvP. Like, I've always been a very competitive person. And it was just kind of like this weird natural like shift into that role, but like not weird at all. Like it just fit and worked, and it was really cool. I super enjoyed doing community for the PvP team there, and yeah, it was funny. Like most of my roommates actually were like ended up being on the PvP team as well. So
Oh, that's too funny. What was your like favorite part of working with the PvP community that you weren't getting with like the alpha community or like the community at large?
oh man, so like not to make the athlete community feel like shit, but there were just so many things that I really enjoyed about PvP and just esports in general. Like I got to go on a trip down to Anaheim for an MLG event down there, and I just remember being that was like my first like esports event that I had ever gone to, like in real life. I'd watch stuff, but that was pretty much it. And yeah, it was like so cool to be able to go to something like that in real life and actually kind of that was the moment that I really fell in love with esports because I saw like Day 9 and DJ Wheat were shoutcasting StarCraft 2, and I was like, this is so cool. Like I don't even play StarCraft 2, but I'm so loving this. And yeah, just to like be so inspired from that trip and then come back to the office, and I really got to do things like I had a whole like shoutcaster program where we would like identify, I say we, but it was mostly just me. I would identify like shoutcasters that were in the community and work with them on like giving them feedback on how they could improve, and also like provide like opportunities for them by doing like tournaments and stuff like that with various like fan sites and whatnot. So I guess like organizing all of that, and then the other side of things was that like right around then I started pushing for like a lot of live streaming as well. So up until then we had done maybe like a handful of live streams at the studio, and like I like live stream was just so important for the esports especially. So I was like, okay, well we have to do more of this, and it like the timing was perfect because actually Grouch, who ended up later on taking my place when I left ArenaNet, he had reached out to me and wanted to do like this whole show where we talk or where we get the developers on and we talk about updates to the game and as it relates to PvP and all this stuff. So yeah, it ended up turning into this like whole production, and we ended up doing it on a regular basis and ended up being called Ready Up. And I just like producing that was one of the like my favorite things that I ever got to do because it ended up turning into like my role now. I feel like I benefit so much from the knowledge and experience that I gained.
That is definitely a good moment to have kind of in your back pocket that leads to very unexpected places, like from MLG to hosting a show to being able to give advice to other shoutcasters. What was some of the most common feedback that you ended up handing out, or what's some of your favorite feedback to make sure people are aware of when they're doing their own shoutcasting?
Well, I thinking about this now, looking back on it, I definitely think that I was a little biased in those situations, but I think for me, the best shoutcasters, and again, I think I'm spoiled also by Day Nine, because Day Nine just has this flair. Like he's so clever, and he makes a show about it, and it's less just reading off like the plays that are happening and more entertainment. Like he's turning that game into entertainment beyond like what it was originally meant to be, and that is kind of what made me fall in love with like the esports and like shoutcasters and just the whole community, because like I was just like, this is so different. You're taking a game and originally it was just meant for, you just log on, you play, and it's fun, but now you're turning this into like a show and adding like kind of this comedic layer to it. So I guess my feedback to shoutcasters was always that, don't lose your personality. Like, make sure to slow down and not. It's not always just about calling out the plays.
I like it. I dig it. Now you've spoken a little bit about esports and that you're really into it. Uh, is Overwatch your go-to game nowadays?
Yeah, it's definitely my go-to game. Like, I watch a little bit of the OWL, but I have to admit, like, life just sometimes gets in the way and you just can't. But with the OWL, I definitely liked to watch just because I'm like, anytime I would play, I'd be like, all right, I gotta see, what this team is doing with their comp, because I want to win, and I sound like such a tryhard right now, but I was like, oh, I gotta study the plays so I can get better at this game. But then, yeah, I think that's what esports is all about. Like, I think a lot of people watch because they want to get better at those games, or they enjoy playing those games. And that's one thing that I like about esports over like traditional sports, is that I think you can actually watch and learn and like apply those skills and like strategies, whereas like watching like basketball, like like you can only do so much of that if your like physical fitness like doesn't allow for it, right?
Right, exactly. And I mean, it's just video games are just that much more accessible, and it's that ease of access of taking something that you've seen and then going out and practicing it. Whether it's League of Legends or Overwatch, you can pick the same character and you have the same attributes and the same qualities and the same skills, and then it's just down to acting in the same way and finding the situation to apply that in. Well, like basketball, like you have to go out, you have to find nine other people or like two other people or and find a spot to do it and have all the equipment and make sure that you're not just going to like blow out a lung just trying.
Yeah, exactly. And I especially with Overwatch, like, yeah, like I've played a lot of Blizzard games, and like I just love the characters in Overwatch. I don't know. I really connect with some of them, and I just think that like the art style and the eclectic like group of heroes is just very, like, I want to support titles like that.
Totally. If you had to pick a team that would be your team in the Overwatch League, who would it be?
Well, I've been watching Siegel for a really long time. I know he's not in OWL anymore, but like when OWL started, I was all about the Dallas team just because he was on it. And like I have been watching his stream since like way before it gained any popularity. So like I don't know. It was like something like even like my fiance and I would sit on the couch and watch his streams together. So I think that there's like a sentimental value there. So I had to root for Dallas when he was on that team.
How about now? Now that there's what, 6 more teams coming in?
Oh man, I think I need to reacquaint myself. You know, actually, that would be one criticism I would have for OWL is like, tell us more about the players, because for me, like I'm someone that likes to follow the players. I like to follow the people, you know, and I care less about like their location. So, like you heard me say, like I followed Dallas because Siegel was on that team, and that's purely because I knew Siegel from his streams. So, like I would like to see Blizzard do something more with that, like have a bio for each player, or like somehow connect their live streams and any content that they make to OWL in some way. I would love to see something like that.
I agree. I honestly don't follow many streamers of or professional esports, and I like end up watching the major competitions and tournaments just to kind of get a sense of how the game is being played at that level. And so I actually end up interacting more with like CEOs and owners on like Twitter and stuff over the individual players, and that's actually like why I'm wearing a Splice jersey right now, just because
Nice.
like I had Marty on the podcast, the CEO of Splice on the podcast last summer, and it's like, yeah, that interaction totally made me a Splice fan. And
Yeah.
but like the Overwatch teams, I have no connection to them because I have no in with the teams, I have no in with the owners, that kind of stuff, and it's really hard for me to be like, okay, I'm going to sit down and go through all these Owl players and be like, which one can I connect with, which one is actually
Yeah.
like, and
Exactly.
I have a hard time like picking a team anyways when it comes to sports. So esports is kind of on that next level, lost on me of like picking a team. I'll be like, no, I like Splice and League, and I like the uh, I don't know, the San Francisco Shock and Overwatch, and then I like Team Envy for CS and all that kind of stuff. It's like I'm all over the place with different games,
Yeah,
but for
exactly.
no real reason.
And I feel like they could do more as well. I mean, there's a variety of things like Blizzard is listening right now. I'm sure you guys have heard this a lot, but yeah, I don't know. I think also there's some things like at, when you say that a team is from Dallas, do something like have a signing in Dallas, or you know, like do something that relates back to those cities, because I feel like it's just arbitrary right now. Like it doesn't really have anything. They're not really tied. And frankly, like as far as I'm aware, the teams all live in Burbank. Like so, it's not like they live in Dallas and they fly on out to Burbank to compete. Like as far as I'm aware. But yeah, I think that there's some stuff that they could do on that front, and just in general, like as someone that plays Overwatch, I also sometimes have a hard time following watching like OWL. I would love to see some sort of way for me to spectate and decide where I watch from. I think that would really help me, at least at, like in a viewing experience, for me to be able to follow what's going on. Like, and for me to say that, like I've been playing Overwatch since it came out, and I still sometimes have a hard time following what's happening just with all the effects. And, you know, there's 12 people in the game, and in a PvP game that draws everyone to like one objective, you're just going to get a lot of these like chaotic team fights. And it's just really hard to follow sometimes. And there are times where I'd just be watching and I'd be like, you know what, I'm just going to go play.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's a thing for pretty much any esport game that all of them would benefit from, was being able to watch the game in client and being able to
Yeah.
control around and spectate it the way that you want to. Because, I mean, when Heroes of the Storm was doing their thing, I would want to follow the players who were playing the character that I was playing, and I would actually end up finding the VODs later or the replays and downloading them and going through them and kind of scrubbing them and then having to do that. But for everyone who's watching the professional level to get better at their game, giving them the option to focus on what they want to focus on is just going to give them even more ammunition and more reason to stick around longer.
Yeah, exactly. And I understand, like, especially working on a streaming platform, I understand like the complexity of that kind of a request. So, um, you know, like quick suggestions would be to like tone down effect spam, or try to develop even some new game modes. I would love to see some new game modes for Overwatch, maybe some modes that have more than just like one objective, like
Hmm.
something that adds a little bit of strategy in there could be a lot of fun. Because I feel like Overwatch is very much like, it's not really, it's all tactical. So yes, it's like very highly like skill based, but there's only so much you can do in terms of strategizing. You're mostly just picking team comps and trying to pick hard counters. And I think actually Siegel did a video about this like not too long ago, a few months ago, where he kind of talked about how the game has just gotten a little stale. And I don't disagree with that. Like, I still love playing Overwatch, and I still am always trying to like rope my friends into playing it, but I really wish that they could do something to spruce everything up.
Yeah, a little bit of that quality of life kind of injection just to kind of keep things fresh and keep things moving and maybe change up how people play a little bit here and there, but not like a dramatic overhaul.
Yeah, for sure.
Because, I mean, they still have a solid core game that a lot of people are happy with, so I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I
Yeah.
totally get
Yep.
the idea of like finding an area that's maybe the least favorite of the magic potion and figure out how to make it better.
Yeah, and you like that's definitely one thing that I learned as a game dev. You really have to pick and choose the areas where you're going to balance things. Like, you can't do everything. Like, there's always, on some level, you always have to prioritize. So you have to decide what's the most important thing. And as you said, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So, like, and the thing is you're never going to make like every single person happy. Like, the most you can do is try to like put in a genuine effort and acknowledge that like people have issues, and try to figure out solutions for them. And if they don't make sense for like what the game is, then that's okay.
Oh man, I think you and I need to talk some more about esports. I think, but I really do want to make sure that other people who listen about trying to get into the games industry or who are in a similar role as you have been in or are now, that they get some advice or maybe some tips. And I mean, for me, I could never have been on the community team because I would have very quickly lost my job or said something that would have really offended someone else, and then spent the next few weeks trying to put out that dumpster fire that I started. So, what got you through those hard times as a CM?
Oh boy. uh you know I'm not gonna lie. There were times where I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is killing me.
Hmm.
And um, what's kept me going is my love for community, my love for esports, and um, kind of just socializing and talking to people. And I don't know. I guess psychology is a subject that fascinates me. So there's some of that. And I think my parents also did a really good job teaching me how to be like forgiving and patient, especially like empathetic as well. And empathy is hugely important when you're doing a community role. So I think just empathy, I guess, would be something that really helps you get through things, because usually you can find a way to relate to the things that people in the community are saying, and then it's just a matter of balancing like your passion for the things that they're passionate about with like the practicality of game development. It's a definite challenge, and um there were definitely like sometimes, especially working in esports, especially where like it would just get so toxic that I would like just need to take a day, like a mental day, and I would like take a bath and like light some candles and meditate, and I'd be okay.
Yeah, good mental health and taking care of yourself after a hard day, definitely a strong way to extend your ability to endure.
Yeah.
So, kind of moving, like I know, so now you wear a lot of different hats being at a startup. What's the startup life being like? Because now I believe you guys, you're live, aren't you, with the V-Real product?
Yeah, we are in early access on Steam, and it's a free app. So it's not fully live. Like we're when we say early access, we mean it is early. um, and what we're doing is also very ambitious. So like we're actually, I don't know, it's very exciting. Going back to like, what is it like I have learned so much in this role. It's been a whirlwind at some like times, and then other times I feel like so confident because I've learned so much. And I guess that's something that I really enjoy about startups, is that I think they actually almost require people to be flexible and require them to be able to wear many hats, because like you don't have 300 people to do all of those things. You're doing it with a team of 20, or sometimes like more often than not less than that. We're lucky to be a relatively large startup as far as startups go. We've got about, I think, 22 or 23 people. But yeah, I love that aspect. It's always challenging, it's always creative, and yeah, I like being able to wear many hats.
And I've heard from other people who have started the or who have gone down the startup route that there's a lot less of those unmentionables or things that you can't cross because things have been so well established. What's that freedom like for you?
Blessing and a curse. Because like at some level you do have to have like a rough roadmap of like where you're going. But at the same time you want to keep it loose so that it does allow for innovation, and it does allow for new ideas to come through, because like when you're a small team like that, you can adapt quickly. You can be one day working on one thing, and then all of a sudden the next, like even in the same day, you could be working on another thing. And it all depends on kind of the goals of the company and where you're at in development. So in that aspect, I really enjoy being able to I don't want to say it, but like it's like fail fast. Like I hate saying that. It's like the cheesiest thing to say, but like, and it is true, because you are a smaller team and there's less like process involved. Like at bigger companies, things are, as you said, very well established. They move a little bit slower. They have to go through like the proper, you know, verifications and stuff like that. But you know, the flip side of that is that you can sometimes not catch like a nasty bug, because you could only spend a short amount of time before you moved on to the next thing. Or um, it can, like, if you try to do things just the fast way, it sometimes means that your product is more buggy. But like it all depends on, again, like the goals of the company and where they're at in development.
Fair enough. And I'm trying to think of a good follow-up question to that, because I mean that's a pretty succinct answer. Uh,
Thanks.
I mean that flexibility and that speed, being able to choose, like, go fast through this part because we just need something quick and dirty, or we need to spend more time on this because that's actually going to be farther down, more impactful farther down the road, and coming back and doing it right is going to be more costly. What's that like? Because I mean, with it being already kind of live, it's early access, so you have to cater to the people who are using your product. At least maybe that's a heavier consideration than it would have been if you were not in early access or not accessible that way.
It definitely is. And the team was really excited to go into early access because it meant that we could finally actually have conversations about what we're building with people and kind of like collaborate in a sense with them. Like right now we have I want to say almost like 20 and what we call ambassadors. They're essentially like partnered content creators, and we get to work with it, and they give us feedback, they request specific games, and we work with them on tools and stuff. So in that regard, I really enjoy uh being, in early access and giving access to people like that. I just think that it just gives you a better idea of where the community is at and what they see in your product and how they want to use it. One thing I love about esports is that, like, I think that the community, like, there's this thing that I think the community has to decide if a game is an esport. And in a sense, I think that the community decides how they want to use your product. Now, you can kind of specifically cater to certain people, like you have your demographics and stuff, but um, I think at the end of the day, you can't always predict how people are going to use the thing that you've built, and that's one of the most exciting things about it.
Okay, you brought esports back up, and I I tried to stay away from it, but you brought it back up, so I'm gonna keep going with it. Now, here's a question, or two questions for you. How has the rise of esports over the last couple of years kind of come into conversation with what you're doing at work, with, or just in VR in general?
Oh yeah. Um, you know, Esports is like one of those things, like when it comes to VR, everyone wants it. And I think there are companies that are investing in it, like ESL and Intel do a lot with games like I want to say like Echo Arena and the Unspoken. I think I forget which games that specifically they were doing stuff with, but they've done competitions. And I don't want to say that it's an esport necessarily, because again, I think that the community decides when something's going to be an esport. But um, esports definitely factor into the conversation at work. I know that, like, actually, quite a few people at the office are pretty into esports. Like, my boss is like an avid Dota 2 player, and she likes going to the international. Like, she's brought her kids. Like, it's pretty funny. And like other folks, like we also have some folks that used to work at Twitch who love esports as well. So I think that when it comes to the actual product though, like we're building a streaming platform. Like esports and streaming, they can't survive without each other, basically. So on some level, like I think that you need to have some, well, actually, I'm going to take that back. Actually, I think streaming would survive without esports, but I do think that esports has significantly impacted the streaming industry, for the better. So I think that esports in general do come into the conversation, and we talk a lot about like, oh, I can see a couple of shoutcasters using this feature because they can spectate and talk about what's going on from wherever they want, and it's not a big deal. Like, and the fact that we have that tech in, and we can take it and put it into multiple games. I think everyone's just kind of waiting for the right game right now. A game that feels like it could really go that far. And VR in general, like, it's so early. Like, it we're still learning a lot about, like, even motion sickness. Like, a lot of people that I talk to, they say like, oh, I haven't tried VR because I get motion sick. And it makes me sad because actually, like, not like, it's a common misconception that all VR gives motion sickness. It's actually certain actions give motion sickness. Certain things that you can do in VR give motion sickness. Just like, certain 2D games might give motion sickness. That doesn't mean that every single one of those gives it. And again, we're learning about like comfort levels and how things can get better with that. So kind of went off the rails on that, but yeah, the gist is that I think that VR and esports will be a thing eventually, and we're just kind of still growing as a community and haven't gotten there yet.
I'm glad to hear you say that because it kind of validates where my mind is at with that space. And it's like, okay, I've done a few VR demos and I've tried it. And it's like, okay, I can see where this is going, but I definitely need that killer app mentality of showing me exactly what it can do at its fullest, or have seen another game really adapt it and make it not feel like a PC to console port of like the early 2000s kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel that way, and I'm a huge believer in VR. And I have the same thing. Like, there's been games that I love playing. Like Beat Saber is super super fun. But again, like, people just consume content so quickly. So games like that really have to keep up with adding new content regularly and stuff. But yeah, I think that we'll get there, and like VR esports would just be so cool. Like, I mean, I've seen some of the tournaments that they've done, and it just like, I can see it. You know what I mean? Like, you just watch it and you're like, okay, I know that this is gonna be a thing. It's just not quite there yet. Like, we're still working on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was at PAX this last year, where it was like a 3-on-3 FPS setup, and these guys were, I was all VR rigs and everything, but then they're in these harnesses in these ring stand-ups where they're kind of also have a harness on it that keeps them upright, but underneath them are these there's treadmill type
Yeah,
things,
yeah.
and I'm like, oh hell yeah!
Yeah.
If I could have laned in Counter Strike, that would have been a whole different game.
And let me tell you, I, as someone that tried the Wii Fit and didn't didn't last with me, um, VR really helps you to get in shape. Holy crap! Like, especially certain games, like, they make you crouch and you're not really thinking about it because you're so immersed. Like, and that sounds like so cliche, but like, I VR really is immersive. Like, once you are in there and you're playing, like, oh, it's so much fun. And you don't even notice, like, I was doing like a playtest for this game called Population One, which is like a battle royale game. So much fun. And in there, you can crouch, you can climb up things, and you're like physically climbing. Like, you have to move your arms, you have to like physically crouch down. And like, we do a playtest and it'd be like an hour long. And I'd just be like actually sore the next day. Like, I mean, because you're doing squats essentially and
Yeah.
you're not paying attention to any of it because you're so immersed in it. Like, So, it's a good way to exercise if you're ever like not too keen on going to the gym.
Right? I'm ready to toss on like some ankle and wrist weights and like just start going. Now the other thing that you kept echoing a lot was like you were waiting for the community to decide that VR was a thing, and it's a lot like that with esports of like deciding when a game becomes an esport, and it's a lot of the grassroots community run tournaments or events that really start, oh, there's an interest in this. And I mean, some of the other games they kind of jump on early, and so it's like kind of fuzzy and hazy, like what's the real goal of this, what's the real polished version of this look like. Do you believe that an esport could be made from the ground up, assuming that there is community interaction?
I think that there's definitely like a checklist of things that are required from the game to be an esport. And things like a spectator mode so that a shoutcaster can watch as a spectator, or just the ability to understand what's happening in the game, the ability to move around in the map as a spectator. Like, there's and custom games, for example, like you're not going to be doing an esports tournament on a live server, right? And
Tell that to Fortnite.
I don't even want to touch that.
Oh.
I just say that's crazy town. But I do think that there's, on some level, like you need to have, and the game needs to be compelling to a degree, right? Like people need to care about watching it. Like they need to care about playing it. So it's not like there's a specific formula, but there's definitely certain things that are important. And like actually, on that, not so much on the like game side, but on the community side, like you need to have like a badass team of community managers that can help to build that community and to help kind of call people and get them watching these tournaments. Like, because at the end of the day, like if you can have a great game, but if you don't have like the recognition from the community, like it doesn't matter what your game is just gonna die, unfortunately. And it makes me sad to say that because I worked on a game that was like that. But yeah, I think that at the end of the day, it's gonna be the community that kind of decides if they care enough to watch the tournaments that you put on.
Do you think that having influencers like hiring like Giant Waffle and Lyric and Shorty to get them to come out and play your game is that enough to kind of kickstart a community around it, or do you really need to like have that more mass kind of alpha exposure to let people have those hundreds of thousands of hours combined to kind of tell you this is what's wrong with it and why it can never be an esport?
I think it depends. Like I've seen like influencer campaigns with like massive influencers go really well, and I've seen them go not really well. So, your game needs to be sticky, and it needs to kind of cater, you need to be prepared. If you're going to do something like that, your servers better be able to stand up to potentially thousands of people randomly coming and playing your game. I know that VR chat is actually a great example of this. Like, I don't think they were expecting in any way for Lyric to start streaming their game, and then all of a sudden thousands and thousands and thousands of people are playing, and VR chat is this huge hit now. Like, so that's a great example actually of like Lyric just picked up the game on his own. I don't think he was actually, like, I don't think he was paid or anything by the VR chat team, and everyone loved it. But again, I think that VR chat was sticky in that it's a social experience. So I think you're gonna do well with social experiences like that, especially in VR. Like social VR is very popular. So Like there's no specific formula, and I don't want to say that like, yeah, like go pay Lyric to play your game, because you know, just having Lyric play your game doesn't mean that people are gonna play it or stick around or invest in it. And sometimes that can actually backfire as well, because like, what if Lyric hates your game? Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's there's definitely some risk involved with that. But I I think that you have to balance that, and you have to decide if it's the right thing for what you're going for. My personal preference is to work with smaller influencers, mostly just because I feel like they tend to be more invested in your product. Like they actually end up caring about your product and like wanting to work with you. And that to me is like, that's a special sauce right there. Like that's what keeps me going, like having people that actually like care about what you're doing, and then like want to help you make it better, is like one of the most rewarding things about my job.
I like it. Can you give an example of your favorite influencer campaign and which one, in your opinion, kind of crashed and burned?
Uh um well, I can tell you that not, actually, most of the stuff that we've done at VReal, I feel like has gone pretty dang well. I again, like
Oh, and
I
it
don't know
doesn't
what
have to be
the
yours. It doesn't have to be V reels or anything. Anything that
yeah
you've learned about,
okay
or I don't. You don't
oh
need to ruin or spoil your job or like put your job on the line.
I'm not I want to say this though, because I do think it's important to like learn from failures and stuff. So I'm not like, oh, I'm not shy about stuff like that. But VReal is actually like just too early on to even know if we've failed or not. So I couldn't even tell you about that. But I will say that like, the community that we've built has been really awesome, and we've been able to work with some like small to medium sized influencers that really inspire me, because they are so into what we're building. Now thinking, let me think about like some bad examples here. That might take me a little bit to think of, because like I, you know, there's information that you don't always have, and
Yeah, that's fair.
like you're not always gonna get data like, oh, this person went and played this game and nobody cared about it. you know, um, yeah. Let me think about that one a little bit more.
The one that stands out in my mind is well, I can't even say it was really, I don't know if it was an influencer thing, but I know that there was a ton of high profile Twitch streamers playing Lawbreakers. This was last
Oh
summer,
no, I remember that.
and it was just like 20, or it was like 20,000 or 50,000 people watching Lawbreakers for like 2 weeks, and then into obscurity. Like not even 100 people playing it on Steam like the week after. It's just like
Yeah,
heartbreaking to see that kind of like push. I'm
yeah.
assuming that there was a push there.
Oh yeah.
I have to assume that there was a push
100%.
there.
And actually, like a lot of those, oh my god, I'm remembering this whole thing now. Maybe I just like blocked it out of my mind, but yeah, I remember like many streamers like put in their titles like hashtag sponsored, and they play it, and then like this is again going back to what I said about just liking working with smaller people,
Yeah.
because I feel like they just are more likely to care about what you're doing. Like they're not just in it for like the money necessarily or for the trends. I mean, at some level, everyone needs to pay their bills. Like I get that, but I think that they do tend to care more, because I think game companies and tech companies, like they help each other. It's like a mutually beneficial partnership, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
just the company that's benefiting and it's not just the influencer that's benefiting, it's usually both. So finding that sweet spot and being able to work something out in those situations is always like the best scenario. um and yeah, I feel for those devs, man.
Yeah.
That's rough, like to have, I mean, I know the amount of work that it is involved, even to just get a call with some people, like get on the phone with them, let alone like convince them to play your game for a couple weeks is like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then for the game to like not do that well afterwards, man, ultimate bummer. I would,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, let's wrap things up with a more positive note. Why don't you, if you are comfortable with, let people know where they can reach out to you, whether they have questions, whether they want to watch you win at Overwatch, or just see what you're doing in social media. If you want to share those out or tell people what you're up to, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. So my Twitter is best underscore huggles, and that's huggles like hugs and snuggles at the same time. So it's like one word, huggles. Um, and that is probably the best way to reach out. Okay, like always down for like private convo or just tweet at me. That works too. I'm also best underscore huggles on Twitch and Instagram. And yeah, I'm always down. Like, if you want advice on how to get in the industry, how to get a like community related like role or product role or QA role, even, I'm always down to have a conversation about that. I love helping people get up on their feet. Because I know like I definitely had people that like helped and like believed in me along the way, and I have to like shout them out, by like it did make a difference. Like it helps to network and everything. So yeah, that's the way to reach me.
Awesome. Thank you, Allie.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And we'll maybe have to get together and watch an Overwatch League match once they show up and start playing again.
Yeah, we're gonna have to find our new like favorite player.
There you go. You tell me your favorite players as they come up, and I'll check them out, and maybe it'll convert me into a team fan.
All right, we'll do.
All right, later.